Well, we've talked about, Remy explained to you the necessity of the industry, but why do you matter? And that's a very important point. And this morning, I would like to introduce you to Marwan Houry, the Principal and Vice President of AE7, who is coming to talk to us today simply about that. Why does the landscape specialties matter to the industry? Marwan, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Marwan Houry.
Thank you. In Switzerland, they have mountains that you can climb up in one day to reach to the top. You stay the night, and then you go down the next day. These mountains are not meant for mountain climbers. These are mountains for people like you and I. We need to be a little better conditioned. But you go, the way it works is that you start in the morning, you go up with a group and a guide, and you go up all the way to the top. You camp, and then you go the next day. Now, after 4 or 5 hours, in a lot of these mountains in Switzerland, there's halfway up the mountain, there's what they call the halfway house. Halfway up the mountain, halfway house. So after 4 or 5 hours of going up the mountain, you're tired, you need a break, so you get to the halfway house. And it's a wonderful sight. You get in, you get welcomed by a beautiful smell of a great lunch that they're preparing. They have fire in the fireplace, they have music and a piano, very cozy, they have big windows bringing in the light. You go in, you sip warm coffee or a hot chocolate, you have a great lunch, you relax, you rest. They have great comfortable chairs. You get your dessert. And then after an hour and a half, the guide stands up and he says, guys, you need to put your gear on. It's time to go all the way up. What I'm going to tell you is a fact. About half of the people decide they're not going to go all the way up. They say, you know what, why don't you guys go? We'll just sit here, stand around the table, we'll just eat some food. Just you guys go, and then tomorrow, when you're coming down, we'll meet here again at the halfway house for lunch. So the people who decide to go, they put their gear on and they go all the way up. And the people who stay back, they eat some more food, they play games, they sit around the piano, they sit around the fireplace, they enjoy their time. And then around 4:30, 4:45, without anybody saying a word, they all start slowly walking towards the big windows. And they start looking outside. And they look up to where their friends are sitting. And they see that their friends have gotten to the top now, and they have their tents out, and they're starting a fire in the fire pit. And then it gets quiet. It gets somber. Because at that point, the guys who stayed back, they realized the big mistake that they've made. They've sold their mission for a few hours of comfort. And then the next day, their friends come down and they meet at lunch, and they're telling them the great things that they've done and how hard it was to get up and how they had to help each other up. And then how they got to the top and the beautiful view that they saw, and they put the flag and they took the selfie with the flag, and then they had the fire in the fire pit, and they spent the night talking about stories, sharing moments, and they're talking, and then the people who stayed back, they don't say much, they just eat their lunch. And then they all move down to the beginning of the mountain where their friends are waiting for them. The people who went all the way up, they're sharing with their friends and they're high-fiving, and their friends are telling them, we're so proud of you, you waited all the way up. And the people who didn't go up, they just take their cars and they go home. Because they realize they're not going to be what they wanted to be. They're not going to see what they wanted to see. They're not going to do what they wanted to do. Because they failed to understand that they needed to take a break and then continue to go all the way up. Guys, I come from the architecture background. I'm an architect. And if us architects only design buildings on the inside, the interior spaces and the mechanical systems and the structures and the facades, then we only have gotten to the halfway house. For us to go all the way up to the top, we need to integrate the public realm and the landscape architecture to be integral in the design process and part of the user experience, the overall user experience. That's the only way we're going to go all the way up to the top. Our respected guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Marwan Houry. I'm a principal and a vice president at AE7. I'm an architect by trade, and I've worked on projects that stretches from as far east as China and as far north as Latvia, all the way to as far west as California in the US. And if I were to discuss with you today the significance and the importance of landscape on the architecture industry and on the buildings industry, I would say that if architecture is the body, the visible form that's shaped by the human hand, then landscape is the breath that animates it. It's the pulse beneath the skin. It's the rhythm of wind and water that keeps it alive. And as architecture stands proud and deliberate, landscape moves. It grows, it erodes, it whispers, and it heals. It is not built to contain life, rather to let it flow. The architect composes walls and roofs, whereas the landscape architect composes horizons, seasons, and environments. One sculpts shelter, the other sculpts belonging. And together they both form a living being. Architecture is the bones and the muscles of the human intention, and landscape is the soul and the breath of the earth. Without the landscape, the building is just a statue. With it, the place becomes a story. A dialogue between the stone and the soil, and between the human and the more than human world. Now, what's your responsibility as a leader in landscape? Raise your hand if you know who Simon Sinek is. Okay, we got a few people. So Simon Sinek is a leader and a writer, American writer, lives in New York. And on Sundays, he wrote the Start With Why and Why Leaders Eat Last. On Sundays, he goes for runs in Central Park. And typically, with Road Runners organization, and typically at the end of the run, the sponsors give away something. They give apples, bagels, donuts. So that day, him and his friend are running, they see that they're giving away bagels. They get to the finish line, and Simon looks at his friend, and he's like, free bagels. They had the bagels on tables, and on one side they had the volunteers giving away the bagels. On the other side, they had the runners standing in line getting the bagels. So he looks at his friend, he's like, free bagels. His friend is like, nah, I don't want to stand in line. Simon looks at his friend, he's like, free bagels. His friend is like, nah, the line is too long. Simon looks for the third time, and his friend is like, free bagels. His friend is like, nah, I don't want to stand in line. The line is too long. So Simon says, at that point, I realized there's two ways of looking at the world, or there's two types of people. There are those who can see what they want, and there's those who can only see what's preventing them from getting what they want. All Simon was able to see was the bagels. All his friend was able to see was the line. Now, as leaders in landscape industry, you need to ask yourselves, am I going to lead and adopt the bagels mentality and push for landscape and public realm to continue to be an integral part of the design process and fight for that? Or am I going to adopt the lion mentality and let the budgets, the design process, the bureaucracy, the buildings industry culture impact landscape and public realm and make it an afterthought and not part of the overall user experience. Ask yourself, am I the bagels person or am I the lions person? Thank you very much. Have a great day.